Welcome to our sherry taste along this evening. My name's Catherine. I'm one of the events managers at the Society. If this is your first time joining one of our online events, and I'm delighted to be joined by Harriet Kininmonth, who is our buyer for sherry. She's going to be leading us through this evening's tasting. Please do use the chat function to let us know what you think of the sherries as you're tasting them. Let us know if you've got any little nibbles that you're enjoying as we go along. And if you've got any questions as well, there is a Q&A function, so you can pop the question in and I'll be on hand to put that to Harriet while we are going through the sherries. Now, just a very quick note on the tasting packs. If you have got the tasting pack and you're tasting along with us, you may have already noticed if you've pre-poured your wines, or it might be something that you come across, and hopefully this will avoid you having that discovery throughout the session. But wines 4 and 6 in the pack, the pouches have been mixed up. So the pouch in wine 6 is actually to be poured in for wine number 4, and for wine number 4, it's to be poured in for wine number 6. But we will take a little bit of a pause as we go through each of the sherries. But welcome, Harriet. It's lovely to have you for your first online event with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Catherine, for the lovely introduction. And yeah, it's lovely to be here and delighted that my first online tasting is a sherry tasting. Anyone who knows me well knows that I love sherry. So when I was gifted, I suppose, the honor and responsibility of doing the buying for sherry, it made me very happy. So I guess just before we start, I'll probably just talk a bit about the kind of little bit about the history and the background. Doesn't mean you can't, get your nose in and have a little taste, pre-taste if you like, but I'll just do a little bit of background. I do recommend, if you've got anything lying around, although I have not done this, I have not been prepared, having a few snacks to hand, because these are definitely food wines. You might have, even the pros among you might have even chilled down the first couple of wines. But really lovely to be here. So I'm going to start by, I think, just giving it this a little bit of history, because actually, this is not a history lesson, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but sherry does have quite a fascinating history, and it is quite linked to the UK as well. It is the oldest wine region in Spain, and I think it dates back to over 3,000 years ago, during the time of the Phoenicians. So they kind of planted the first vines in Jerez, and then began sending their wine across the Mediterranean. This was then continued by the Romans, and then later the Moors, who ruled the region for centuries. Even though drinking was banned, the vineyards remained. And actually, the name sherry comes from their word for Jerez, which is sherish. I am not sure if that's the correct pronunciation. And then the city returned to Christian rule, and sherry really started traveling properly, especially to England. And there's a really, really strong link between England and the region. We became the kind of biggest consumers and promoters of sherry for several centuries. And there's a great story about sort of the glorified pirate Sir Francis Drake, who famously stole around 3,000 barrels of sherry during a raid on Cadiz and took it back to England, which essentially kind of caused it to become really sort of popular and famous and fashionable. And you'll sometimes find it in kind of Shakespeare's references and other references as well. The Americas then developed a thirst in the 18th and 19th centuries, and actually the fortification, because sherry is a fortified wine, is largely due to the need to stabilize the wine on the journeys that the barrels took to America. It wasn't sort of deliberate taste profiling at the time, and so yeah, and that's really, and it was around this time that sherry, as we know it today, kind of really took shape with that Solera system, which I'll talk through a little bit, and where the wines are kind of blended over time for that consistency and character. And 20th century, sherry became really important, really distinct, and actually became one of Spain's first kind of DOs, like protected regions. And then I guess the kind of most recent history it's been really interesting. You know, for me, I've spent some time in Jerez, and producers have been really kind of asking us, or begging, you know, English buyers, are you going to buy more? Are you going to buy lots of sherry? Because, you know, there was a time in the kind of 50s to the 70s where a lot of kind of mass market cream style sherries were really big and really popular. A lot of them were quite entry level, actually. And then in the kind of 80s, the tastes just really sort of changed to more sort of table wines. Other wines came in, and it kind of nosedived and fell out of fashion quite dramatically. So it's you know, it's sad in one respect, but what's really encouraging is there is this kind of micro trend of the kind of drier, more premium, finer styles of sherry kind of coming back. I mean, everyone talks about the big revolution. I'm not sure it's quite that yet, but one by one, I am hoping to convert as many wine drinkers over to sherry as possible. So hopefully you'll join me in the revolution. So that's a little kind of very brief history of sherry. And then just looking at kind of where it is, sherry comes from a really specific corner of southern Spain known as the sort of sherry triangle, and that's made up of 3 towns. That's Jerez de la Frontera, Sanlúcar de Barrameda, the top, and El Puerto de Santa Maria. This kind of whole landscape is shaped by the sea, by the river, and by the really bright white chalky soils called albariza, which I will briefly touch on. So you've got to the west, you've got the Atlantic Ocean, which plays a really important role. It's kind of cool sea breezes moderate the heat and add a gentle sort of salinity to the flavor of the wines, especially in Sanlúcar de Barrameda. And then you've also got the inland kind of Cadiz as well, with the mountains. So you've got, and the river brings a lot of humidity as well. So you've got all these influences bringing something distinctive. Jerez de la Frontera is the heart of sherry. It's where most of the region's bodegas age and blend their wines. It's a lovely place to visit if you haven't been, and yeah, very famous for its flamenco. El Puerto de Santa Maria is a fishing town near the coast, with lots of seaside humidity, which is really good for the wines that are aging underfloor. And then you've got Sanlúcar de Barrameda, which is the kind of coolest and breeziest of all the 3 towns, and it's the only place where Manzanilla sherry can be made, and it really just known for its sort of distinct, sort of salty, fresh elegance. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's ever been, but if you have, share your stories. It's very hot in the summer, so I'd avoid going like peak summertime, but it's a lovely place to visit. So this is just a little kind of image of the albariza soils. These are quite unique to the region. It's a chalky white soil and what's really great about it is it retains water brilliantly, because again, it's a hot part of Spain, which really helps the vine survive those hot, dry summers, and encouraging deep root growth, which with more nutrients, more complex flavors. It's sort of nice to see that a lot of growers, as with many parts of the world, are working more sustainably, reducing chemicals, encouraging biodiversity, and sort of letting the soil and vines manage themselves more naturally. So it's nice to see that starting to happen in Jerez. And so albariza is almost unique to Jerez, which is why it's so closely tied to sherry production. There are other chalky limestone-rich soils in places like Champagne or in parts of southern Italy, but this particular mix of chalk, clay, and sand really defines the albariza, and mainly its kind of water retention properties, which are amazing. So that, along with sort of the other terroir, I guess, for sherry and the way it's aged, makes it something really unique and special. So here we have a diagram. Everyone loves a diagram, and I'm going to try and, without getting kind of overly technical, but just try and kind of break down the kind of main different styles of sherry, because this is kind of where the magic happens. There are 2 quite different kind of key ways that sherry can be broadly categorized. One is the biological aging, and the other is oxidative aging. So the first one, biological aging, which is that kind of on the left, the floor protection, kind of that side of the diagram. So first of all, the wines chosen generally for biological aging are wines that are kind of designated or decided by the cellar master as the most elegant, kind of the finest wines, and they get chosen for the biological aging. So what happens? What is biological aging? This happens when the wine is aged under a natural layer of yeast, which is called flor. Kind of think of flor as a protective blanket that kind of forms on the surface of the wine in the barrel. I've got a photo that I'll show you next if that's hard to imagine. And it stops the wine from being in contact with the oxygen, so it prevents oxidation. And it also gives sherries like Fino and Manzanilla their kind of pale color, light body, and those lovely kind of bready, salty, almondy flavors. And then to the right, you've got the oxidative aging. Here, the wine is fortified to a high level where the flor can't survive and is exposed to air in the barrel. So over time, these styles, Olorosos, become darker and richer and more concentrated because the water sort of slowly evaporates through the wood. And here you get kind of like nuttier, more fuller, more amber in color styles. So you kind of probably see that a little bit with your sherry rainbow lineup if you've poured your glasses out. Amontillados, they start off under biological aging and then they get aged. They spend the second part of their aging with oxidatively. So they've got a little bit of the freshness of those Finos and Manzanillas, but also some of that nutty oxidative kind of tertiary characters. And then you've got a kind of the wild card Palo Cortado, which I'll maybe just talk through when we get to it. So the way it works is, and the unique part is this, the Solera system is instead of aging like one wine from one single year, like you see in most places, the sherries are kind of aged in rows of barrels stacked by age. So the oldest wine is at the bottom, and that's called the Solera. And then the younger wines sit above in tiers, and these are called Criaderas, which means nurseries. So when the wine is bottled, it comes from the oldest barrel, so it comes from the Solera, but only a small amount is taken from the old barrels, and then the space left is topped up with wine from the row above, and then that is topped up with the wine from the row above, and so on. So it's like kind of refreshing and blending gradually over time, and it kind of keeps the wine consistent, and it keeps the kind of freshness as well to the wines. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I just thought there's a couple of nice pictures I found online. On the left, you've got, that's the flor. So that's that protective blanket, which is consuming oxygen and glycerol and not letting any oxygen in, and also imparting those kind of bready, sourdough, lovely flavors. And then actually on the right, you can see a sort of Solera system in situ, kind of, rather than a diagram, which I thought was quite nice. So that's kind of my very brief intro to sherry, but I thought maybe we probably should start tasting, because that's probably what you're mostly here for. So if you want to get your wine number one ready, and we can taste together. Are there any questions at this point, Catherine? Are we good? Should we crack on?
No questions yet. I'm just a little bit jealous of everyone with all of their snacks. But I think
oh no, I know, Dad. Well, what's next? I've got my dad here, you see, and I forgot to tell him to bring snacks. So number one, Lustau La Ina Fino. So Lustau is a very well-known producer. It's actually one of my favorite sherry producers. Lustau bought La Ina off a big company called Pedro Ximénez, who went into liquidation. This is a kind of high production Fino. It's 4,200 cask Solera. So they are producing high volumes, but the quality just never seems to be compromised, in my view. And in our Champions Taste wine Champions blind tasting this year, it got high points from all the buyers and was a champ. It's aged for about 6 years, and actually it's funny, I was thinking about like sherries. Obviously we kind of do refer to them as Christmas as being a time for sherry, which absolutely is, but I also think that summer is a real time for sherry, especially when you think of some of the foods that you pair sherry with. And I tend to, and it doesn't mean you have to, I tend to drink more kind of finos and manzanillas in the summertime with seafood, and then kind of some of those richer, sweeter styles at Christmas. But I think you can drink sherry all year round, any type of style of sherry all year round. So yeah, I think this has got a lovely nose. It's lots of kind of salted almonds. You'd really get the character of the floor coming through, kind of brioche, walnut, like, and a nice sort of citrus zest as well on the nose. It really kind of fills your mouth. It's so tangy and delicious. I think important thing, and I've sort of tried to put this in with each of the wines, is the sort of the sort of serving temperature. Oh, what snacks? Thank you. Some nuts. The serving temperature. So kind of finos and manzanillas really should be served very cold. 7 to 9 degrees. And one of the things that makes me saddest in life is when I go to a pub or bar and I see a bottle of like just Tio Pepe Fino just sitting on the shelf, on the back shelf of the bar, along with all the vodkas and have you, and it's probably been there for months and it's lost all of its delicious freshness that floor worked so hard to keep. So you need to treat Fino and Manzanilla as almost like a kind of white wine. So, if you're not going to finish the bottle, then stick it back in the fridge and consume it within a week. And again, you don't want these wines aren't going to get much better, if at all, once you get them. So they're almost best enjoyed fresh. So I hope you enjoy it. I think pairing wise, this is a really good one for nuts and olives, cured meats. But I think also one of the things that, if you go over to the region, they'll just eat a lot of seafood with finos and manzanillas. They kind of see it much more as a kind of seafood kind of food pairing. So I do quite like to kind of just kind of really simple prawns or clams and butter, really nothing, really fresh and salty and delicious. So that's number one. How about a little nut? And so the next wine is the Alegria Manzanilla. Again, for me, this is another summer sherry, but I would still drink it all year round because I love it. This is produced by Williams and Humbert, which is actually they were British, because a lot of British people went over there. They're one of the historic names of Jerez, founded in the late 19th century, and they're kind of still one of the most sort of striking bodegas and real early champions of the Solera system as well. Actually, I haven't mentioned it. This is Palomino. So all the wines, with the exception of the last one, are all made from the Palomino grape. That is the key, and I don't know the percentage, but it must be something like 90. That is what all kind of fine sherries are made of. Generally, you do get Pedro Ximénez for the sweet wines. You do get some Moscatel as well. Palomino can also be known as Lustau Blanco in the Canary Islands. It can make some really kind of quite fabulous mineral saline wines, as well as delicious sherries. So like the Fino, this is made from the Palomino grape. And again, this has got kind of an average age of around 6 years. What makes Manzanilla different to Fino? Well, they're both pretty much made in the same way. The difference is where the vines were grown, where they're aged. So all the Manzanillas are from Sanlúcar de Barrameda. Sanlúcar is cooler and it's more humid due to its proximity to the sea. And what this means is the this encourages a thicker, more consistent floor that's often stays like all year round. And what that does is it gives a sort of slightly more kind of sea breeze, finer, more kind of coastal, more delicate, lighter, fresher style. Certainly kind of usually more saline. People often say kind of chamomile. You get more chamomile with Manzanillas. And this is just a cracking kind of classic example and such good value Manzanilla. And it's sort of, again, similar to the Fino in terms of drink it cold, have it with seafood, have it with some salty snacks, but let it be the main event as well. It doesn't have to just be an aperitif. If you're having a nice seafood dish, put it in a nice big wine glass, nice and cold, and have it with your seafood. Oh yeah. So again, I think you've got some similar profiles here, but just maybe a little bit less kind of like croissant and baked bread. A little bit lighter, a little bit more kind of orange peel I get. Yes, you definitely get a little bit of kind of slightly salty nutty, but it's much kind of more fresher and more citrusy.
We've had a question from David Harriet, and I think it will apply to the Manzanilla as well.
Yeah.
But he was asking, if you do have to put your Fino in the fridge because you've not quite finished it, would you recommend just putting the stopper back in or using something like a vacuvan to prolong it a little bit more?
I think if you've got a vacuvan, use it. Definitely. It depends how much is left in the bottle. So if you just have a glass, if you just pour it out and have a kind of one glass and you've got most of the bottle left, then it will last longer. But if you've only got a couple of glasses left in there and you've got a vacuvan, then absolutely, they work. So use one if you've got one. They don't usually last very long in my house, sherries, so it's not a problem that I have very often. Great. Well, I hope you like those too. So I'm going to move on to the next wine, which is a Palo Cortado, which is kind of the fluke wine. This is a bit newer to our range. Actually, just before I interject, I was doing my sherry kind of ranging planning a few weeks ago, and I don't know if I should be sharing this, but we're buying at the wine site 1 million bottles of sherry a year, which means you're drinking 1 million bottles of sherry, which must make us one of the most important importers of sherry in the UK, certainly of premium sherry. So just want to say thank you for being sherry fans. Anyway, but a lot of those, I've been buying sherry for a year, so a lot of the range obviously has been done by Tim and Marcel in the past. But this was one of the wines that I brought in. I think it's been in the range for about a year now. I tasted it at a tasting and I just sort of fell in love. It's produced by the Barbadillo, which you might have come across. They're quite prolific. They were founded in 1821 and they remain family run. They are kind of known for their being pioneers in Manzanilla, but they're making wines from all over the Sherry Triangle, and they have they're working with 500 hectares of vineyards, and they're also responsible for our Soleil, which is a big member favorite. So this is one of their newer releases. So basically, Palo Cortado is a wine that is meant to be a Fino. So this wine is meant to be a Fino. We want it to be a Fino. And then for some freak of nature, the floor dies off and then it spends a bit more time aging oxidatively. Amontillados, the difference being that's a bit more deliberate, whereas Palo Cortado, it dies off and then they fortify it to a higher degree, and it ends up being kind of somewhere between a kind of an Amontillado and an Oloroso in style. This one is average age is about 10 years. And it's actually the Palo Cortados can kind of range. We've got a couple more gutsy ones in our range. But what I loved about this is a really light and ethereal style of Palo Cortado, which just kind of really, it really got me. And it's got some kind of guts and power, but it's something really kind of beautiful and elegant about it. I think like Jamon Iberico is missing from the pictures that I pulled together. This for me is a really, really Jamon-y Hanoni wine. And then the other thing to mention about this wine is it says En Rama. En Rama is becoming a real trend in the Jerez region. You see it more with the Finos and the Manzanillas, and what it basically means is raw, so unfiltered, unfined. So most wines go through a kind of clarification, filtering process before they're bottled and exported. But if it's En Rama, and that will stabilize the wine a bit more. When it's En Rama, it literally goes straight from the cask into bottle. So it's the closest you'll get from drinking, like being there and drinking straight from the cask. It does mean that sometimes like there's a risk of the wines being can be a little bit unstable, but I've never seen it with this one. So yes, this has got lovely kind of hazelnut. Again, so much going on. They're so powerful and long and complex. I'm just looking at the note here, and it says antique furniture, which I think is quite nice, which I obviously wrote. But I get that kind of almost like Gothic church antique. There's something kind of something going on here. But yeah, really pretty on the nose. And you get instantly a lot more weight and a kind of spice as well. But it's so dry, and it makes me kind of really want to eat food. This is just, they're just such gastronomic wines, these, and I think this is a really well priced fine wine that really over delivers. I have actually occasionally, when I've had this at home, when I'm like cooking, because I do cook quite a lot of shellfish and seafood, just with a little bit of garlic, just something simple. I just a tiny bit of dash of this in that kind of sauce with that kind of butter garlic, and then parsley. Don't need much because obviously it's quite a strong flavor, but and you get that when you go to the region, but it's really, really good. Don't use too much because it's designed to be drunk, but it can really enhance your cooking as well. Cool.
We've just had a question with this one, Harriet, that was asking if you could explain what the Criadera selection means with this.
To be honest, I'm not sure. I would expect it to mean that it's from selected barrels, and part of the name. So I will come back to you on that. I will do that. I'll find out exactly what it means. So that's just really me hazarding a guess. But it's not one of their big production wines. It's a relatively new range they brought out. So I imagine it's from kind of selected casks, and being a Palo Cortado makes sense. But I will somehow come back to you. Can we make that happen, Catherine? Like any questions that
Yes.
or information? Because I want this.
Yeah, we can drop you an email with
exactly
what that means.
Fab. Right. So I hope people are enjoying them. I can't see any of the comments, so I'm hoping that that you're liking some of them at least. Okay, so wine number 4, and just as a kind of recap, if your wine looks like a kind of treacly molasses, you haven't switched them. Because wine number 4 should look like this and not like this, which was the mix up. So make sure you have switched them over if you haven't already. So now we are moving to an Amontillado style. I drink a lot of Amontillado. I do like oxidative flavors as well. So and this is one of my favorites. So again, as I said, this starts off, if you think back to that diagram, this starts off as a Fino. And it spends, I think, about 8 years aging under floor. And then it goes to a third Criadera for another 4 years, where it's oxidized. So floor dies off naturally after about 8 years anyway. And then after then it reaches the Solera. It's really, really dry. It's about 4 grams per liter of sugar, if that means anything to anyone. You can find Amontillados with varying degrees of sweetness. And that's usually done by adding PX to the wine afterwards. But this is a dry style. And it's well, let's just taste it, shall we? Oh, this is for me like kind of salted caramel. It's really evocative. It's kind of get like, so I get kind of slightly polish and not unpleasant, kind of like slight kind of polish aromas. It's really mellow, really hazelnutty. But you get some of those kind of, you do get a little bit of that kind of slightly bready, yeasty lift, freshness, salinity that you get from the Finos. It's still there. You can feel that in the wine. So there's a real elegance to it as well. Lots of kind of dried fruit, dried nuts, and oh, it's really good. And there's a saying for food matching, and I can't remember it. I meant to look it up before I came here tonight. It's an Andalusian saying. It's not English, and it's something like if it's got if it's a Fino or Manzanilla, or if it swims, it's a Fino or Manzanilla. If it's got two legs, it's an Amontillado. Drink it with an Amontillado. If it's got four legs, drink it with an Oloroso. So this does go. These are some pairing suggestions from the Sherry website, but this does go really well with kind of chicken dishes, dark. This can be part of the main meal. Not just the kind of precursor to something else. Also really good with cheese. I've got a little bit more of a dry palate. So I prefer dry kind of wines with my cheese personally. So yeah, it can be really, really good with cheese or even like a consomme, white meat, wild mushrooms. I think it would go really well with, it's making me hungry, and very delicious. I hope people are enjoying it.
I think what's nice and what we're seeing so far as well is that you will be able to put a full menu together just serving sherry. You can have it for the entirety of a dinner party if you were so inclined.
Yeah, make sure to give your guests water if you're doing that.
Maybe
sure
bread in between.
Sure to hydrate the dress. I learned that the hard way. Okay, so we're going to move on to some sort of sweeter styles now, kind of the last two. We've got the exhibition. So we've got a few exhibition wines. We've got our Fino, where we've got Society's Fino. We've got medium dry Oloroso. We've got a medium dry Amontillado, and we've got medium sweet Oloroso. I bring these wines before we go through. I bring these wines with me to music festivals, and I don't know how many members on this call go camping or go to music festivals, but I'm going to tell you why these are the best wines to take camping with you. Firstly, as you can see from kind of the sort of temperature, doesn't need to be super cold, and actually the evenings in England generally cool down to quite a good, nice temperature. The alcohol content's relatively high, and without going into too much detail, going to the toilet at a festival can be quite annoying. There's a little benefit there. It tastes delicious, so you get to drink something you just absolutely love, not kind of warm beer or warm cider or someone's not particularly nice, entry-level Pinot Grigio that they brought, with all the best intentions. So you get to drink really well. And also when people start kind of raiding everyone's tents for the last of the drinks on day 3 of your festival and camping, no one goes for the sherry, so you're guaranteed that no one's nicked it. And on the last night, you can still drink like a queen or a king. So that's my little life hack with these styles of sherries. So Santos Ramate, going into the actual wine, is the producer, and they actually produce all of our own label sherries, and I can see why, having been there for a year. We've got an incredibly fantastic long-standing relationship with Peter. Some of you might have met him at our tastings, and he gives us the opportunity to source exclusive Soleras from within the bodega, that gives members something that's completely exclusive, that's really special, and that has real consistency for our exhibition sherries. It also allows us to, like with all our kind of exhibition wines, I guess, really be able to deliver really good pricing without rupturing the market at all or upsetting anyone else. So it's really nice to be able to offer such good wines at what I think is just incredible value. So yeah, they're a serious sherry house. They give us a lot of freedom. And this one here is this is Palomino with a little bit of PX for the sweetening. It's 85% of it is 30-year-old Palomino Solera. So it's actually really very old, and that's topped up with 20-year-old PX. And this is a great, again, not overly sweet. I mean, it's still very sweet, but it's about 95 grams per litre residual sugar. And I often think sometimes the sweetness that you pair, if you want a sweet wine with a sweet dessert, if you want to go sweet, sometimes if you get it slightly wrong, it just makes it just very jarring, and it makes it not taste very nice. And actually in a Christmas pudding, there's a lot of fruit, there's quite a lot of acidity. It's not like super sickly sweet, like like chocolate. And I just think this is a really nice pairing for Christmas pud, because I find sometimes things like sauternes or some of those more kind of traditional French dessert wines actually too sweet, and it makes the pudding not taste so great. So yeah, let's have a little dip in. But it's definitely like, I get kind of figgy, for me I get like figgy pudding, like on the nose even. It's like a fruit and nut bar, raisins, dates, prunes. It probably could work with some dark chocolates that aren't, again, overly sweet. It's sort of opulent without being cloying. Yeah, really powerful. And again, that's that sweetness you get at first, but actually the finish is very long and a little bit more drying, and you get all those kind of dried nuts and on the finish. So I think this would stand up to a lot of puddings, particularly when they're not overly sweet, which is again how I like my puddings. And £14.95 a bottle. And again, this one, again, you don't, David asked earlier, because of the oxidation, that it's not, you can keep this, you can open this at the beginning of Christmas and have a little glass every night, if you like, with your mince pie, and it can, it won't deteriorate. So I keep, again, one of this wine exactly and I also actually personally like it slightly chilled down, but that's personal preference. So you can, if you like it a little bit chilled down as well. I take it out the fridge 20 minutes before, and then I have a little glass at Christmas time. So yeah, be nice to hear what you guys think.
There's definitely some fans of the sweeter styles.
Yeah,
it's great to accompany puddings. Yeah.
Well, we're doing really well. I'm whizzing through these. Okay. Now we're going to move on to the next wine, which is quite far out. I mean, it's like having kind of treacle in your glass. What an amazing, this is just otherworldly, quite frankly, and there's nothing else like it. This is a PX, so Pedro Ximénez, often described as PX. And this is a different grape variety. Again, this is a grape that's often used to sweeten the drier styles. but look how viscous it is. And I do ever have, one of the kind of classic wine terms as well, is, the legs, how does it have good legs? And it's sort of largely irrelevant, I think, when describing a wine. But this is a wine that really does have legs because it's got high alcohol and high glycerol and high sugar. And you can see, if you give it a good old swirl, you can see those lines kind of dripping down. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's better quality, but it does have good legs. So why is this so viscous? Why is it like this? So this is due to extreme sugar concentration from sun drying. So the Pedro Ximénez grapes are spread out on mats in the Andalusian sun for about 17 to 15 days. And there they dehydrate, they lose half of their water, and the sugars and the glycerol become really, really concentrated. So they're kind of like semi raisins, somewhere between a grape and a raisin. At this point, when they're like all shriveled and concentrated, the must is pressed and it produces that grape juice, which is almost like a kind of thick molasses. And then the next stage of the process is to ferment this, but it's so dense that fermentation almost like barely starts. So it's at that stage they then add the brandy, which is what they use to fortify. So they use a kind of pure grape spirit. They don't use anything else. That's always how they fortify sherry. They add that, and then it is matured in the Solera system. Through the Criadera, through the Solera, just as the others are. This like the Amontillado, this is an average of 15 years age. And I was doing a bit of reading on the train home this morning, and I also learned that Don Zoilo is the largest wine cellar in Europe with a 180,000 meters squared cellar. So I thought that was quite kind of fun fact I would share with you. I don't know if anyone can guess the residual sugar, if anyone wants to try and guess. Should we give them a free bottle if they guess it right? I don't know. No Googling. I'm getting a bit rogue now. Has anyone put any?
We've had a few. We've had 200 grams,
Okay.
250,
Yeah.
450.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're in between. We're somewhere in between 450 and 200. So
we've got a 300 come in.
Yeah, 300. Okay.
And we've had someone, Elizabeth has said, it's such a surprise and it's definitely a replacement for their usual port this year.
Oh,
I think that's a strong commendation for the Pedro Ximénez.
Sherry taking on port. Well, the answer is, so well done, I think, because you're pretty close. 380 grams of residual sugar. I mean, there's so many words you can use to describe this wine. It's kind of, it starts off for me as like dates. It is really raisiny, raisins and dates and dark chocolate and treacle, figs, honey, caramel. And there's just loads going on. And yes, this works with cheese. Works really, really well with cheese. But I keep a stash of this at home because I'm not very good at. I love cooking. I consider myself a not too bad cook. A lot to learn. I'm not very good at puddings though. Never have been. But a lot of my friends love puddings and love sweet food. I have a stash of this at home, and if I'm panicking on a weekend, on a Saturday or Sunday lunch, if I've got friends coming around and I know I need a pudding, I get a really good quality vanilla ice cream, and then I pour this on top in a little pretty bowl, and it's literally the best thing you've ever tasted, and everyone just goes crazy. So if whether you just want to have that as your little bedtime treat for yourself, or you want to use it to entertain, it's so delicious with vanilla ice cream. So I would, I would suggest giving it a try if you haven't already. There is nothing quite like it. Any questions? Oh, I've got one more. I've got one more slide actually, because I feel quite strongly about this. So I think a lot of people will serve sherry out of the top level, and that's tradition. And tradition is an important part of love and family and life. But if you really want to make the most out of the aromas, and all that these wines have to give, the glasses at the top aren't very good. You want to be able to really swirl your glass around like I am here, and that really releases all of those flavors, gets the oxygen going and brings them out. And you just can't do that with those kind of smaller kind of I call them the granny glasses, but it's a bit mean. So it's all about personal preference. But since I'm hosting this, I thought I'd share mine. I think all drinking out of wines where, and they can be different, varying degrees of sort of shape, but they have to have enough room to get that wine going, to aerate it. So I thought I'd share that with you. I kind of feel the same way about champagne, to be honest. I don't really particularly like champagne in a flute. I like it, particularly if it's a good champagne, proper champagne. You want to be able to, because you can't swirl a champagne glass, you want to be able to nose it and really release all those amazing aromas. And then finally, that's a really young me when I first went to sherry, trying my go at being the Venenciador. So yeah, I thought I'd sort of share that. And on the right, to prove how much of a diehard sherry fan I am, that's my dog Fino. So she's actually here. She's not a puppy anymore, but I named my dog Fino because I love sherry so much. So if you didn't believe me before, then you do now.
I think that definitely cements you as the sherry buyer. It's a very cute dog. And we do have some questions that have come through actually. One of them has come from Colin, and it's actually whether you could touch on a little bit as buyer for Spain as well, on the new trend for more dry wines from Jerez, so from the Palomino grape.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. It's a Colin. Yeah. There is quite a new legislation that's just been passed, and it's currently called Vino de Pasto, and they are allowing wines to be aged kind of Palomino grape. Most of the styles are aged under floor, but not fortified. And I have tasted 2 or 3 in the last year, and they're quite good. They're quite exciting. Again, Palomino hasn't got very high acidity. It is a hot country, so you're not going to get some of the acidity that certain fine wines want, but that floor character gives it something totally unique. And I think it could be a quite interesting stepping stone as well to get people out of that mindset from sherry as Bristol cream and for grannies and really uncool. And I think I've got some plans to do a little mini offer hopefully next year to just introduce 1 or 2 of the ones that I think are really good, and it almost being the beginning of that kind of journey into sherry. So yeah, watch this space. I think it's a good thing for the region. The region needs to struggling a bit, and they need to continue to modernize and challenge the status quo and not keep doing what they've always been doing and try new things. And there are some especially in those kind of more artisanal producers, some really good stuff coming out. So yeah, we'll see.
Perfect, thank you. We've also had a question from your fellow buyer and big sherry fan, Matthew, and he'd like to know what where you see the future of sherry being. So is it maybe more in lower volume but more premium? Could there be single vineyard sherry as something that we see in the future? Is there anything that you're seeing? as the developments of it as style.
I think absolutely. I mean, the great thing about sherry is it delivers value. It is such good value if you consider that process, how long these wines have been. That's Fino. Sorry about that. How long these wines have been aged for, the process that goes into it. These wines are criminally good value. So what I keep telling people is imagine the value you can get at the premium end. So I think small batch, kind of smaller producers, focusing a bit more on the soil and the terroir. I mean, you can't get away from the quite unique aging process in Jerez, and that humidity, the fact that that floor can exist there, you can't really do that anywhere else. Maybe in the Jura to a slightly similar but different, but that is unique and that will stay. But let's look at kind of more individuality. There are a few producers like La Bota there, who are just doing small batch. Maybe that consistency year after year is what people are going to want. They're going to want to see the reflection of the people, their story, the land. So I think that will gradually come in, and I think education is going to be really important. And I think the sherry and the sherry dia are really great, actually. And it's Sherry Week this week, and the activity is fantastic, and they're really working hard to educate people and push education and more premium styles. So I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I'd like to think that like at the Wine Society, my role will be to be at the forefront of that and to trial these new styles and champion these people. So that's my kind of mid to long term vision for the region, which is very exciting.
Right. And I think kind of tying into that, we've had a question from Stephanie asking if there's a particular reason why the UK ended up going mostly down the sweet sherry route. And I'm assuming, Stephanie, you mean from like a consumer preference historically rather than looking at the dry styles.
Do you know what? I don't actually know. It's kind of like this kind of Beaujolais Nouveau kind of fad thing, but I don't know. I mean, the answer is I don't know that part of history very well. It's a really, really good question. I think it came from the consumer preference from the UK, maybe from other countries as well, and whatever happened, we got sick of it because it wasn't very good. Everyone rushed to kind of meet the demands of what was a fad. But yeah, it's a good question, and I'm sorry I can't answer it better than that.
And I mean, we've had a lot of comments coming in of people that just singing the praises of sherry, which is lovely to see. And I think that is quite pertinent to the other few questions that we've had, which is if you were to go and visit the area, is there any particular producers that you would recommend people seek out to visit?
I tell you what, I'm going there. I'm going to go there this year. Well, no, it's 2026. So I'll tell you then, because I haven't actually been there for about 8 years. I think Lustau. Well, I've been to Santo Tromate because I worked with them in a previous life, so I'd absolutely go and see them, especially as a member because they'll really look after you. I'd go to Lustau, but even the big ones, González Bias are amazing. They do great tastings. So the tourism is good there. But in terms of these smaller guys and some of that kind of more personal, I'll be able to answer that better in about a year's time.
Great stuff. And then just to finish off on, I'm kind of combining a couple of questions here. When you have your bottles and perhaps you've not opened them yet, and also on the flip side, when they are open, how would you store them? Would you have them stood up, lying down? And then also from Kevin, he's asked if a sherry has a cork rather than a stopper, could you use a caravan to help prolong the shelf life?
Oh, goodness. I don't know. I mean, a caravan will work in a cork, no matter what, that's what it's designed to do. Um, and I would store, again, if it's a feed, I would store it on it so it's in contact with the cork. As always, for all wines. But that's a good question. They never last very long in my house. I mean, I think generally speaking, you don't buy sherry to age it. So that's probably why I can't answer it very well. Generally speaking, it's best drunk young. However, it's quite nice to find one lurking around in the back of your cellar that probably isn't drinking as it was designed to be, but still tastes completely sensational. I found that with a few kind of Enrama Finos, which are supposed to be drunk completely fresh, completely raw, and actually they can still be quite delicious even even a year later, or a couple of years later, when you didn't realize they were still there. So I hope that's answered your question. And also, I can see comments coming through now because I've taken the presentation off, but I think our members seem to have really good recommendations for where to go. So I'm making note of those.
I think Robert's hit the nail on the head when he said sherry is best drunk, not kept once it's opened.
Yeah. Oh, can I stop the share?
Quite agree, Robert.
Yeah, I agree too. Well, I hope that there's some, I mean, it feels like there's so many sherry fans among us, but I hope if there's 40 people here, I hope, and two of them have never drunk sherry, I hope that at least one of them has now become a sherry convert, because it takes time. I work very hard. I work very hard to convert my friends one by one. I'm still working on some of them, but I'll never give up.
Perfect. I think that's brilliant. We're getting some thumbs up coming through. I mean, it's been lovely trying the sherries alongside you, talking about them, Harriet. So thank you so much for doing that for us this evening, particularly in the week of celebrating Sherry Week. Got some definite ones to add to my ever-growing sherry list. I do love how sort of versatile and moorish it is as a wine, and as you say, the value that you can get for it being such a fine wine as well. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, everyone. Yeah, and enjoy what's left in your glass if there is anything else. And it's kind of weird not seeing any of you, but thanks for joining, and happy Sherry Week.